got the flu before, it's all right.
Yeah, I've seen that. Thank you very much. Yes, that's good. Yeah, all right. Thank you. Okay, we'll see you after. Now, please just get. Yeah. Okay. Now, the situation with Australia is farm-wise as though we were on a different planet to Central Europe, to parts of Russia and parts of America and parts of a few other places. I mentioned one reason for that right at the beginning of the ripping lecture in Volume 1, namely we have not what is called groundwater in those other countries, where you don't see a rainwater tank in the countryside for domestic water supply. You just dig a hole, put rocks in and a pump on, and it has always got water. That does not exist here. Now, how vital that is, apart from not having water, has to be considered, and I'll only just skimp at that. You know what relationship is between moon and water. There you have the plant in between, and whether there is water underneath or not, I don't mean a stream or a basin of water, I mean groundwater. You just go and think about that yourselves. That makes a tremendous difference to the plant, to the interaction between warmth, light, extra rain, etc. The irrigation farmers know, however they irrigate, it never does the same that a natural rain does. You get a natural rain and immediately the clover is up in a totally different way to having been kept alive barely by irrigation and so on. Well, that's just one qualitative aspect that could be put in conjunction with this, but the whole depth of what it means to have groundwater or not is a separate subject and is not for today. Now, a second point is I've been intrigued for most of my life to watch what has happened to the English language development in different countries. And on the continent or in England, there are 4 distinguishable seasons. When summer starts, there is no stopping it again. You put all your woolies away and you just don't need them anymore. And so it goes with the 4 very, very clear-cut seasons. Well, here in Australia, in the southern rainfall areas, if a farmer says we've had a good season, he means a good spring. The other seasons don't really exist, other than say we've had a bad spring and there was a good autumn. Then they will again say, it being autumn, we've had a good season. Yeah. But the whole conceptualness of speaking of seasons is totally different to Europe. A further point is we have no good soils in Australia on a world quality scale. We have some basalt soils that are biologically quite immature. We have some good river flats. They exist because Peter was robbed to feed Paul. In other words, they have what came down with the river from higher up. The biogeography of where those river flats are would have never made the soil that is on those river flats. The biogeography of parts of England and parts of Europe was such that it was natural for white clover to come into existence. Yeah? And to be maintained there, of course. That is sustainable agriculture. If you're dependent on robbing Peter to feed Paul, whether it is by fertilizer application in a water-soluble form, or whether it is by bringing in organic matter, or using rock phosphate, none of that is sustainable agriculture. It is bringing in elements the same as using artificial fertilizer. It's not sustainable agriculture. Truly speaking, sustainable agriculture is that something can maintain itself biogeographically in its own environment. Now, the biogeography here is drought in the extreme inland and the salt bush and sand, and on the opposite end it is, say, the rainforests all down the coast. You've got immense lush growth on top, and you've got absolutely no development underneath. 3 years cleared, and that soil, be it in Brazil or be it here, is some of the deadest. Now, we move between those two extremes here in Australia. And a further point, we have no winter with snow. I have likened in one lecture a drought, or the dry 4 or 5 months of the year that everybody experiences, either in the summer rainfall areas or in the winter rainfall areas. I've likened that to the European winter, because there is a cessation of natural activity, of growth and whatever else. That does not mean that that actually is qualitatively the same as a winter. Not at all. And again, I will skimp over what qualitatively is a winter, where you have, from the summer, you go into the beautiful autumn, you have, in natural environment, not artificial, you have the leaves discolor quite differently to artificial environment, you have the sap withdraw, you have a wonderful activity, very similar at one level, not at all levels, at a lowish level, of what goes on with you every night. A third of your life you sleep. And that sleep is vital for your health. It's very similar with winter, and then you have a total cessation. But, for instance, we know what goes on with our 500 in winter. There is something happening, but not visible in the normal sense of plant activity. So that would be a theme for it by itself, to really discuss the quality of winter for the whole nature environment. We haven't got that at all here. And then the coming up of spring. See? The entire farming in Australia to date, even in the so-called organic environments, has been considered from plant production aspects, not from plant growth aspects. We're the only ones who are actually concerned with that. But to many of you, it may not have been sufficiently raised into your consciousness. Plant production aspect is just, you see, and there we are all, we all have to give full due and express our gratitude to artificial fertilizers. Australia is so poorly supplied, well, starting with phosphate. When I first came here, there were still a lot of the say 70 and 80-year-old Gippsland dairy farmers alive who'd actually started dairying down there. And for a few years, when they started on those hills, it was marvelous. And then the phosphate ran out. And from the early 1900s until after the First World War, those farms were in a pretty poor state. And then phosphate came in, and suddenly the whole lot flourished up again. They gave me a real history of that. And without that, we would really be agriculturally rather insignificant here. Furthermore, with the exception of one grower in this room who grows macadamia nuts, there may be a second one has come down with him. There is not a person in this room who is growing an Australian native agriculturally. They are all imported plants. They all don't belong here. So from the aspect of biogeography, we are in the straitjacket. We're in a terrible position. Our sustainability ranges between the saltbush sand and the rainforest lush upper growth. We have no regular rainfall anywhere in Australia. not the rainfall that those biogeographic regions of Europe, the Ukraine and parts of America, although it's changing a bit due to man's influence even there, that they have, or had when I was a child, 3 weeks without rain in summer in Germany was almost never experienced. Just impossible. I remember an old peasant sitting outside his bench, one of those from whom I learned most. And there had been maybe a fortnight no rain. And he was sighing with the actual ground. Yeah. And, you know, deep, good soil and so on, you would not have seen any lack of moisture whatsoever. To him, he could sense that there was lack of vibrancy. And he said, boy, we need rain, you see, in such a way. Now, normally, it's not 3 days, and you will sunshine, and you will again have some rain, not too much. And all the time, it's kept going from both sides. We can have a biodynamically developed farm of considerable development. And then you have 4 months or 5 months, not a drought, but just no rain, which is quite normal. We've had it just this summer down here. And you can watch an enormous reduction, not just because it's dry and when the rain comes everything is okay again. Even when the rain comes, there has been an enormous reduction of the really permanent humus level that is chewed up by the plants like dragged out of blotting paper. Yeah. And we have to do something immediately. The rain comes after to keep this going, what we had once started. And there are various ways of doing that. There are various technical skills. There are management skills. We want to go into that today. I haven't got all of that on film yet. There's a lot to be added to this film. I know where to get the pictures if I get to that farm, and it's just at the right time. Now, prolonged wet, like we had last summer, autumn, winter, until October, right down from Cairns, the coast, and to where we are, that was the highest rainfall for that period ever measured since white man is here. And you see, the immediate result was, as soon as it stopped raining, the ground everywhere was much harder, cracked even on good biodynamic soils. Ours will come back again quicker, but after such a long drenching, the ground suffers. And if we had had a quarter of that rain in that period, our ground would have benefited from that rain, and it would have breathed and biologically been active, and it couldn't be. It was just drenched full. And so ground goes back again. Yeah? These are the two extremes, the coast rainforest and the salt bush. We have no balance in between. And we've all the time got to admonish to what needs doing in that situation. In Europe, in those prime areas, that all does not exist. And if a European farmer, say, at one of these conferences, you'll have an Englishman and he will tell glorious stories of organic farming in England, it's totally irrelevant to us. Totally irrelevant. Yeah? Just as it is irrelevant if someone here in one of the more favored areas inherited a farm that has never been bashed, and he can sort of, with only slight mining, keep it going in his lifetime, and then he goes to some of those mined-out wheat farmers and says, well, I can do it, why can't you, you see? That is not very helpful, and is again totally irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. Yeah. So, in this situation, what can we do biodynamically? In volume 2, at least, I have demonstrated to a degree light ether with conventional so-called scientific approach, you just can't approach that subject. But to those who can follow, and to those who have successfully used 501, they know that the same crystallinity that I've put into a building there appears in their plants. Don Rathbone already many, many years ago showed in stale autumn cows with autumn safe pasture how he would increase both milk and butterfat production. But you want to look at how the plants change. I've already got some of that on video that will come in a later film on the top of plants. Now, 501 works not with the sun. Although you're using the sun, you're spraying it in early morning sunlight, it actually works with light ether. And the sunlight only acts like the outside of this vessel here to hold water. It's not actually the force that we're encouraging. Sun has no such force on its own. It is a physical light that is finite and fixed and can be measured out physically. Light ether is a force, a power, that like a power in a man or a power in art can actually do something, generate something. That is what light ether is. That is totally different. When that book is out, I can speak after that on 4 ethers. Light ether works in the background of light, of physical light. There's an ether that works in the background of water, just as creatively. And likewise of the straight out physical and of warmth. Warmth is perhaps the most ingenious. I can't speak of these until the methodicity of it, of speaking thereof, has been established, and that is what I do in this book. It is far more important than any of the agricultural work I have done, but it's also in the background of that. Now, I can't speak of this properly now, but I can only hint that we can stimulate, like we can stimulate light and change the appearance of plants from being sloppy to crystallinity, where there is a totally different food value, where they will not be subject to rot if it's fruit trees, because they are actually like a plant grown in drier weather, up on a mountain rather than in sloppy seaside conditions. Likewise, can we work with these 4 other major elements, and in fact can cause a balancing of the 4 elements that are totally imbalanced into heat and light on the one side and hard ground, and on the other side along the coast a lot of moisture, imbalanced in Australia. We can balance that out with biodynamics. And before I say more there, we will start